my slides. Let's just make sure technology works, right? Are you getting there? Oh, you are. Okay, right here. Good. All right, again, I'm so happy to be here this morning. For those of you who don't know me, most of you, I guess everyone, most of you, don't know me. My name is Henrique Gomes, as it is on the bulletin. And as you can see by my name and my accent, I'm not from around here. That's because I'm from the deep south, if you know what I mean, right? You get to Key West and you keep going south. I'm from the country of Brazil. I was born in Brazil, lived there most of my life, came to the United States back in 2000, and been here since then. Most recently, I've been working at the Carolina Conference for about 3 years. 2 of those years, I worked as the associate communication director, helping them with communication in all the conference. But then, since January of 2024, I was transitioned to work as an associate pastor at the Sharon Seventh-day Adventist Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you so much, Pastor Will, for the invitation. I'm happy to be here because every Sabbath is amazing, right? And I love just to be part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church because I know that every Sabbath morning, anywhere I am in the world, I can just walk into a church and feel home and feel like this is my home, okay? So I'm very happy. And today, Pastor Will said that we have a special youth Sabbath. And as I was thinking, what am I going to say to the youth? What am I going to tell them? And something came into my head, just, bear with me a little bit. But I think I'm going to talk about church history and our pioneers. Oh, that's crazy. Why would you do this? Well, that's because, as you get older, and I am getting older, as you get older, you realize that newer generations tend to forget the things of the older generation. And the Bible verse that we read today for scripture reading, it's a very special one in Isaiah 46:9. He says, "Remember the former things, those of long ago. I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me." It's a beautiful thing, to remember is just a gift. It's something amazing, very important in our lives. Because the same God that led us in the past is leading us right now. And we can have the assurance and the hope that He will be leading us in the future as well. So that's why it's very important for us to keep that in mind. We sometimes are pretty good remembering our own personal history. And we know where we came from. We know our families and everything. But a lot of the times, we tend to forget our collective history. We forget about our family history sometimes, or country's history. Sometimes we even forget the history of civilization in general, and we tend to make the same mistakes. And why not say we forget the history of our own church? Now, the lessons we learn, from those things are something that we can use to help us deal with problems and situations we face in the future. So that's why it's important. But every time we talk about history, let me tell you this, be the first one to tell you that it is a very touchy subject for me. The reason is I always hated history. Back in school, when I was in school, middle school, high school, history was my least favorite subject in all school. If I had to choose a class to skip, it would definitely be history. I hated it. Every time we had a test, I would read everything, try to memorize, cram everything 1 minute before class, get to the test, write everything I could, forget about everything as soon as I was done. I could not remember anything. And this was just me. My grandpa, he was a history teacher, and I did not get the gene that he had, But anyways, when it came to history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I knew who this lady was, Ellen White. I had heard of her. I didn't know exactly who she was or what she did. I didn't know about her life, but I had heard of her from few people. And everything. Now, I leave Brazil and I come to the United States, and I feel God calling me to go into ministry. And I say yes, and I go to this school, Southwestern Adventist University in King, Texas. And when I get there, now I am a theology major, and theology has a lot of history in it. So you have a lot of history classes to take, and you know what I did? I just pushed all the classes. I was like, I'll take them later. I got my last year. Oh, let me tell you, one semester I had to take 9 credits of history classes. You know what 9 credits is for someone who doesn't like history? It's torture, okay? I was miserable the whole semester. And let me tell you, it was the worst grades I had, the whole program, I had. But that was a good thing, right? Because during seminary, we had a few classes about church history, which I did not pay attention very well. But I did learn that Ellen White was married, and she had a husband. His name was James White. And I was like, that's pretty cool, but I did not care much about it. So I just kept on life, And once I finished, and I worked here and there, a little bit, and then I went to Andrews University to do my master's degree, because that's what you do. So when I got there, I found out something amazing. I found out the Andrews University is named after one of the pioneers. I did not know it. And during just the whole orientation, they told us, and I was like, oh, that's pretty neat, but who cares, right? I did not care about it. So when I got there, I was just like living life, and I said, I need to find a place to work. So I started applying everywhere in school. And one of the places called me back, and I did an interview. And this place was this one over here. I don't know if you've ever been to Andrews University. This is the Center for Adventist Research. You know what they do there? They keep Adventist history. Very fitting for a guy who does not like history at all, right? But anyways, I went there. I did my interview. I did not tell them my feelings about history, of course, right? And I got the job. I was like, yes, it was good. But working for the center was really weird, very weird. Because people look at you and they assume that you know everything about history of the church. They come to you with names and dates and places, and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I tried to get away as much as I could and hide into my cubicle and just do my job, right? And what was my job back then? My job at CAR was to digitize old reel-to-reels. Some of you might be old enough to remember those. Okay, those are awesome, right? So those big reels, and this was my job. So the center had rows, and there were a couple rows full of reel-to-reels that people had donated, and they just gave it to them. Most of them had no labels. Most of them had no titles. There were no catalogs, nothing. They were just there. And my job was to take those reels and put on the machine and record them, put them into an MP3, and while it was playing, I was listening to it and making notes to kind of like create a database out of it, right? Trying to figure out if there was any names, any places, anything mentioning it. And this is what I did. And let me tell you a story about this time, One day I was listening to this sermon from a camp meeting in Michigan, and this guy came on, and he was telling a story, and I was like, this is awesome. I was sitting at the edge of my seat. It was a great story. And I was like, listening, I need to find out who this guy is. And he was telling his first name throughout the whole time. And I was like, okay, I got it. But his first name didn't mean much. What's his last name? And then by the end of it, it was almost 1 hour of story. By the end of the hour, a guy came in and he prayed for him. And right before the tape cut off, I heard his last name. And I was so excited. I wrote it down. I took it to my boss and I said, listen, I got to tell you about this guy. This guy is awesome. He tells good stories. He's great. And he's interesting. We got to find out more about him because we have to let people know who this guy is. And my boss asked, what's his name? And I said to her, Eric Hare. You guys don't know who Eric Hare is? Well, he's known as Eric B. Hare. He's probably one of the best storytellers of the whole Adventist church. Okay, she laughed at me. She took me all the way to the back and showed me a few boxes that we have full of recordings of him and everything. But let me tell you, I was hooked on him because his stories were just amazing. So during this time, I was learning so much and listening to it. But again, I still did not care much about history, at all. But then one day, this person over here, I was digitizing a music, somebody singing, and this person came behind me. His name was Stan Hickerson. I'm not expecting you guys to know him, but let me tell you who he is. Pastor Stan, he used to be a pastor in Michigan, in the Michigan area, but then he changed and he became a full-time researcher because he loved history. He loved the history of the church. And Pastor Stan, he was working with the Adventist Encyclopedia, and what he was doing there was writing different articles about different people of our history in the encyclopedia. He had something special about history and history of the church in special, and also to share the history with other people. A few years before that, he had created those trading cards with the faces of our pioneers in them, just so kids could have them and trade them. I think it was during the St. Louis General Conference, and that's the kind of mind he had, because he had the passion to let people know about our pioneers. And I never understood that really well, right? So one day I was there, like I said, listening to this music. He comes behind me, and I take my headphones, and he comes and says, "Hey, do you know that Ellen's favorite song is Jesus, Lover of My Soul? And do you know that Ellen was an alto?" And first thought was, okay, who's Ellen? You know, are you talking about the secretary or your wife? But why should I care? Later on, I found out that he was talking about Ellen White. Yeah, but you see, I had never heard anyone talk about Ellen White as Ellen, like she's a real person, you know? To me, she was always like, way far. Ellen, who's Ellen? And, you know, I was kind of amazed, you know, because every day after that, he would come and tell me a different story. Sometimes it was from Ellen, right? Sometimes it was from her husband, James, like he would call him. And sometimes it was from someone I had no idea who he was, like W.W. Prescott. But every day he would come to me and tell me a story. And he would tell the story as if he was that person's neighbor, like he knew that person personally. And to me, it was mind-boggling. How does this man know all of these things about these people? And why does he treat them like they are their friends? And one day he was telling me a story, and, you know, another amazing story. And after that, I came to him and I said, "Stan, I don't understand. How do you see these people as your friends, as someone close to you?" He came to me and he told me, "You see, Henry, they had the same issues as we have. They struggled the same way we struggled. They went through life the same way we go through life. In a sense, they're just like us." That's what he said. And that stuck with me a lot. They're just like us. They're not different than you and me. They're not in a different realm that we are right now. The way we struggle is the way they struggled. The way they had problems, we have problems today. So that's why I felt it was important for me to know these people like Stan knew, because I wanted to know them as well, so I could learn with their lives as well. And throughout the next few months, year even, I started looking at their lives. I started looking at what they wrote, at what they believed and everything, and kind of getting this idea, this lesson into my life. You see, it was really fun because in the Center for Adventist Research, there are a lot of diaries from these people. Diaries are very personal, right? And I remember growing up, if I read my sister's diary, I would be in very big trouble, okay? But if you're reading a diary from a person in the 1800s, it's called research, okay? So you're okay doing it, you know, no problem, no problem with that, right? So a year after I met Stan and I was listening to him, we had lots of plans. We were going to do like a music section from the pioneers, how they would sing back then, so people would get this idea. We were going to do a 2-minute video, about the stories, kind of like what he was doing to me. We were going to do an Ellen White cartoon for kids. We had like tons of ideas, and we wanted to try to combine our talents together so we could do something amazing, so people would know their stories and that they're just like us. This was our goal. But unfortunately, Pastor Stan found out he had a brain tumor. And in a matter of weeks, he was dead. And let me tell you, I only knew him for less than a year. But I felt his death way more than I should have. And I think it was because I missed that little connection that we had, with the Adventist history. Because he taught me something that no other teacher had ever taught me before. That these people, they are not far away. They're right here, close to her, and they're just like us. They live life just like us. And I missed him for that, But he put a fire inside of me about the Adventist church. And let me tell you, it grew and grew and grew, and I started reading more about them. I'm not a scholar by any means, right? I'm not a scholar. I still don't like much history. I still mess up dates and places once in a while. So forgive me if I ever do this, But I do like their stories, and I take them personally. I try to learn from them. Now today coming here, I was like, which person should I talk about it? Which person is going to make the most impact? Well, maybe I could talk about E.J. Wagoner. You know, and not because he's awesome sideburns. I don't know if you can see, but his sideburns are just great. But because he was a young man, very young man, and he was he had a leading role in the Righteousness by Faith revival streaming from the 1888 General Conference. It was him, okay? He helped it. Or maybe we could talk about Rachel Oakes and how she was so courageous that she stood up for what she believed and the truth. And she's the main reason why we worship on Sabbath today. Okay, that's the lady, she's awesome. Or maybe even about Wilcott Littlejohn. This was an amazing man. He was blind, but still he was a writer, he was a preacher, he was an administrator, and a very good one. He had troubles in the church. He left the church for a long time. He came back to Jesus. He made himself stronger. An amazing story as well. Uriah Smith, of course, he's a great guy. At 23 years old, 23, he became the head editor of the Review-Herald. What a responsibility for a 23-year-old man. I wonder if our administration today would give this position to any 23-year-old person. But they did, and he was amazing. He made something no one could ever done. He made the Review-Herald be something amazing. And of course, I could definitely talk about my favorite person. I got to know this person a lot by reading a lot of him, and I really like him. His name is W.W. Simpson. And let me tell you, he's one of my favorite persons because he grew up an atheist, but he became an Adventist as a teenager. And then he decided just to go and preach the gospel everywhere. So he went to Canada to preach, and he was arrested for working on Sunday, which was Sabbath for them, right? So he got arrested. He stayed in jail for 40 days. He took pictures and made advertisements for that. He was a very smart guy. He thought always outside of the box. Then he moved from Canada to California, and he started preaching all over Southern California, all the way to San Francisco, And in LA itself, he had meetings that were awesome. They had over 2,000 people coming and seeing, and from those meetings, he baptized over 300 of them. He actually commissioned some papier-mâché beasts from Daniel that you can see even today in the Center for Adventist Research. So every day I would walk in, come to work, and I would see the beasts there, and then my mind never thought about who made these beasts. And one day I stopped and I read the little card, and I found about his name, and I start researching more about him, and I see what an amazing life he had. And he did all of this before he was 35. Because he died at 35, because he was sick. Anyways, but who should I talk? So, no, I don't want to talk about any of those today. I chose carefully, and I decided to go with the person that probably changed my perspective the most when it comes to Adventist history. And this is Ellen White. And you might be thinking, well, Ellen White, I know who Ellen White is. Well, I knew too. I had heard about her. But let me tell you how I heard about Ellen White. It was never in a positive way. Because growing up, people would use her books to bash me in the head, both literally and not literally. Both. But they would bash me with this. Everything I wanted to do was, Ellen White said you shouldn't be doing this. Ellen White says you can't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. Everything was negative. Everything was negative. I did not know who Ellen White was, but I just knew that I did not like that mean old lady, because everything was no for her. Well, I used to be in school as well, and in school, every time you made something bad, like you came out late. I was in a boarding school, so every time you came out late to worship and all of this, they would give us punishment, and the punishment was to copy Ellen White's books. And trust me, I'd done a lot of copying, and let me tell you this. Excuse me. Let me tell you this. I never learned a thing from it, because I just copied. I never paid attention to it. I never liked her. The name Ellen White meant punishment to me. It meant restriction. I hated that old lady, because I did not know who she was, but I couldn't do anything because of her. I had no idea who she really was, or what she's gone through, or what kind of life she lived. Nobody never told me about her. Then I began to work in the center. And once I began to work in the center, I kind of had to know who she was. I kind of had to know what kind of person she was. So I began to read. Now I knew that she was an alto, And I knew as well that she liked the song, Jesus, Lover of My Soul. There were two things new, but I wanted to know really who the person was, right? So today I want to talk a little bit about her life, and especially the beginning and the end of her ministry, which to me have impacted the most. Everything else, it's really nice, and everything she did was nice, but the beginning and the end, wow, that impacted a lot my life. Now, let me begin to say that Alan Harmon was born on November 26, 1827, in Gorham, Maine, which is a few miles from Portland. Just see, I don't know if you've ever been there. One thing I did not know was that Ellen White had a twin sister. Her name was Elizabeth. Yes, you know, they were the youngest of 8 children that her parents were. They were very busy, 8 children. Now, her father was this mean-looking person over here. His name was Robert, and he was a farmer. But when Ellen White was 9 years old, they moved from the farm closer to the city, and the father became a hat maker. And then Ellen would go to school, closer to the city as well. Now, you might have heard the story, when Ellen was 9 years old, she was coming back from school and with her sisters and friends, and a 13-year-old girl threw a rock at her, and he struck right in the nose. Perfect hit, right in the nose. She fell off. She fell down. She fainted, and when she woke up, she was inside of a store. And the person owning the store said, "Hey, let me take you home." And she said, "No, I'm fine. I'll just walk." And she walked with her sisters, but she got home. Her face was just, wow, weird. Her father, he was traveling at the time. By the time he got back, he said that he could not recognize his little daughter. It was so bad. She said that she had to stay in bed most of the time. And for months, she could only breathe through her mouth. Think about how bad that was, Actually, at age 9, she gave a little prayer, and she recollects the story, She gave a little prayer, giving her life to God because she thought she was going to die. She knew she was going to die. And she was not alone, because her family also thought that she was going to die as well, because she was so frail, so bad, But despite all odds, she started getting better. And she started growing. Now she's 12 years old. And her parents take her to a Methodist camp meeting. And when she's there, she listens to an appeal, an altar call, and she accepts it, and she wants to be baptized. And she decides right there to be baptized. Well, in the Methodist church, you don't get baptized right away. You have to wait for probation. So she had to wait for 2 years in probation before she was baptized. But eventually, she was on June 26, 1842, she was definitely baptized by immersion in the ocean. So it was an amazing time for her. But she had a big problem with one of their doctrines. She had a big problem with the doctrine of eternal punishment. She could not see a loving God that would punish someone forever. She was so afraid of not being saved and being sent to hell and burned forever that her heart was just divided. It was like there was a dark wall between her and God. She was so afraid of not to be saved. She did not want to burn forever. She tells us that every night before going to bed, she would wait all her brothers and sisters go to sleep, and she would kneel down beside her bed and just pray, "Please, Lord, save me. Please, Lord, save me," and repeat, repeat, and repeat. She's only 14 at this time. Now, a 14-year-old should not be thinking about this, right? But that was her biggest struggle right there. "Please, Lord, save me." Now, she found the strength to go and tell her mom what's going on. And when she tells mom she doesn't know what to do. So she says, "Well, go see Pastor Stockman, Elder Stockman." Which was Elder Levi Stockman, which was one of the elders in the Methodist Church, a very Christian person, He's an awesome person. He goes and talks to her, and both of them are talking a little bit, and she explains everything that is happening to her, all her fears, everything that is going on, her fear of not being saved. And here's what he tells her: "Ellen, you are only a child. Yours is the most singular experience for one of your tender age. Jesus must be preparing you for some special work." What an amazing words that he said, right? And then he started to tell her that because she's thinking about her salvation, it means the Holy Spirit is working on her. So that means, she's doing the right thing. She's thinking about it and not to worry about it because Jesus died for our sins. And because of his love, we are saved. And after the conversation, she felt a lot better. This is what she writes about the conversation. She says, my mind was much relieved. And the wretched slavery of doubt and fear disappeared as I listened to the wise and tender counsels of this teacher in Israel. I left his presence comforted and encouraged. During the few minutes in which I received instructions from Elder Stockman, I had obtained more knowledge on the subject of God's loving and pitying tenderness than from all the sermons and exhortations to which I had listened. What an amazing thing, right? During that same time, Ellen and her family, they listened about the message of the Millerite movement, that we were studying this morning in Sabbath school. Right now, they're listening to it, and they are expecting Jesus to return on October 22nd, 1844. Like everybody else, she was counting the days until the day she would see Jesus. She really wanted to see Jesus. She was sure of her salvation now. However, after that day passed, Jesus didn't return. And like many other people, she suffered during the situation because we have no idea what they went through. I mean, we can kind of think about it, but we have no idea. Think about it. These people had told everyone that they're going to heaven. And all of a sudden, they have to go back to their same stores, walk the same roads, go back to the same schools. This was awful, People would mock them every time they went, everywhere they went. They would throw rocks and things at them. They would shout at them. It was so bad that they had to walk through fields, take little shortcuts or do different things just so they wouldn't see people because they were mocked every single day. How awful is that? And she's only 17 at this time. Only 17. She's just growing. Now, on December of 1844, less than 2 months after the Great Disappointment, Ellen Harmon was at one of the Adventist sisters' house. Her name was Mrs. Haynes in South Portland, Maine. And what was she doing there in this house? She was there to pray with them. Because like we studied this morning, and I really like how we put that, there was, everybody was disappointed. But different people dealt with this differently. Some people just said, okay, no, Jesus is going to come next year or next month or tomorrow. They had different dates, and they started putting dates because, no, we're just wrong on the date and kept putting different dates. Some people just said, you know what, forget about it. This Jesus, if Jesus didn't come back, that means he's not real. Just forget about it. Just come out of the way. No problem. I don't believe in him anymore. But there was a group of people that said, hey, listen, maybe we should ask God what happened. Maybe it wasn't, we didn't make a whole mistake, but maybe the mistake was ours, not God's. Maybe he didn't come because something we didn't see. So they kept praying and asking God, what did we make a mistake on? And that's what she was doing there. She was praying. She was praying for all the Advent believers who were still waiting. Even though some fell off the wagon, but some of them kept faithful, trying to understand why God didn't return. People were praying for God, that God would show them what went wrong. They were praying for understanding. And when you pray for understanding, God gives you understanding. And this is what happened to Ellen White. This is what she recollects about this day. She says, at this time, I visited one of our Advent sisters. And in the morning, we bowed around the family altar. It was not an exciting occasion, as you can imagine, right? And there were but 5 of us present, all female. While praying, the power of God came upon me as I never had felt before. And I was wrapped up in vision of God's glory and seemed to be rising higher and higher from the earth. And was shown something of the travels of the Advent people to the holy city. While she was praying, all of a sudden she started going up, at least in her mind she would see it going up and up and up, and she had this whole vision that God showed her what was happening at that time right there. Now, I'm not going to go through in details of all the vision because it would take so long. But let me tell you, it's one of the prettiest things you've ever seen. It's one of the most hopeful visions you will ever read. Please read it because it's going to give you that anxious anxiety to see Jesus coming soon when you read that. But this is what happened, She started going up and up and up. And she's trying to see for the Advent people, her people, The people she's praying for, where are they? Where are they? She can't see them. But then a voice comes and says, look again and look a little higher. So she looks again, and what she sees, this is one of the paintings in the general conference, a great paint about, about this whole vision. But she sees the whole Advent people walking into a narrow way. They're walking into a narrow way. Behind them, there's a light, and it's called the midnight cry. That's a light that is guiding them in a way. In front of them, there's Jesus. And as long as people look at Jesus, they're fine. As long as they keep looking at Jesus, they are okay. But some of them would say, oh, I don't believe this is not going to happen, and they would fall off from the path. So those who were still faithful, looking at Jesus, they were waiting for him, and they were expecting him to come back. They were expecting Jesus' second coming. And a little bit later, Ellen White was able to see Jesus coming in his full glory and splendor. And I cannot even imagine what she saw. But I imagine my whole life, I've been imagining how would it be for Jesus to return. And I think that even though I might think an amazing thing in my brain, it's going to be a lot better. I'm going to be surprised by it. But one thing that she mentions that I thought it was just beautiful is that when Jesus is returning, all the trumpets are playing, and everything it's shouting, and things are happening, and everything. Somebody comes and stands and says, who shall be able to stand in front of God? Who has their robes clean? And then all of a sudden, everything stops. The trumpet stops. The shouting stops. Everything stops, and there's an awkward silence everywhere. You probably can hear a pin drop, right? Because the answer to that question is no one. No one can stand in front of God because no one has their robes clean. No one is just enough to stand before God. But then Jesus breaks the silence. And I love that Jesus is the one that breaks the silence. And he says, those who have clean hands and pure hearts shall be able to stand. My grace is sufficient for you. Brothers and sisters, we're going to stand during the second coming, not because we can, but because Jesus can. He's the one who's going to be, because his grace is sufficient for all of us. And that was amazing. She saw Jesus, and then she was taken up, and she's now going to heaven. When she gets there, there's a sea of glass, and she says the most beautiful thing she's seen, and this is just the entrance of the place. Now, when she gets there, one thing that boggled my mind was that Jesus came personally and gave one crown to each person. He did not say, hey, everyone, give the crown to everybody. Welcome, everybody. Let's make it quicker, right? No. He took time to take each one and give a crown specifically to them. Because Jesus, he's your personal savior. He's not the savior, of a group or anything. No, he saves each person individually. He looks at you individually. And she says that these crowns, they were beautiful. Some of them have lots of stars. Some of them have little stars. But everyone was content with the crown they had. Because everyone is happy just to be there. It's just great to be there. And once he's done with all of this, he comes and says, come on, everybody, let's go into the city. And as they go into the city, she sees this beautiful city, the throne of God and the waterfall coming out of it. There's the tree of life that goes, one in each side of the river that connects in the center. There's the fruit that looks like a mix of gold and silver. What an amazing thing, right? And as she's getting close to the tree of life, she sees two people. She sees this guy named Charles Fitch and Levi Stockman, the guy who talked to her when she was a teenager a few years before. Those two people, they had died right before the 1844 disappointment. And they came to her and they said, hey, good to see you here. Hey, tell us, what were the struggles of the people of God before his second coming? And she thought out with herself, what were the struggles? What were the struggles? What were the struggles? She couldn't think of anything. And it taught me that, heaven is so good that you forget every single bad thing that ever happened to you. You won't be able to remember those things because heaven is so amazing, so good, that you don't want to think about those things. Anyways, as she's getting to know everything, pretty soon the New Jerusalem is coming down on earth, and it's settled here. When it gets to earth, she goes out, and now she's walking around, and she sees lots of mansions. And she says those houses were beautiful. prettier than anything she has ever seen. And inside those houses, which I thought was fascinating, there's a little shelf made out of gold. And those shelves are for you to take out your crown and put on top of the shelves. And people would do that and go outside and work on the land. And it wasn't something like, tedious and, I don't like to work with the land. I really don't, right? I'd rather buy my tomatoes than plant them. But anyway, some people do like them, and this is good. It's good to know. But over there, it was so good because people would continually shout praises to God. They were working on the land and just saying, oh, how good God is. Just singing a song, Heaven was everything they thought and much more, right? She looks to the side, and she sees this beautiful field of flowers. She runs to it, she picks a flower, and she says, they'll never fade. What an awesome place. She looks to the other side, and she sees this beautiful grass. You've heard the expression, the grass is greener on the other side. Let me tell you right now, the grass is greener in heaven, okay? That's the only place that this applies, all right? This is what she said. She says, the grass was a living green and had a reflection of silver and gold as he waved proudly to the glory of King Jesus. Everything in heaven, praise God. Everything in heaven is pointing to Jesus. Everything in nature is pointing to Jesus. She keeps walking, and she sees animals, tigers, lions, bears, and they're all fine. She walks past them, and they walk behind her like they were pets. And she was just amazed with it. As she's walking, she sees another group walking as well and exploring the place. But this group was different. They had white robes, and their robes were brighter than anything else. And on the bottom of their robes, there was like a hem of red. Just a little bit of red underneath it. And she came and she asked Jesus, because yes, Jesus was giving her a tour guide, Jesus was her tour guide. And he said, who are these people? And Jesus said, these people, they are the ones who died for me. They are the ones who are martyrs because of me. And she gets amazed because with them, they were not alone. There was, as she puts in here, she says, there was an innumerable a company of little ones, little children, running everywhere as well with this group. And you know what? She says, they also had a red on their garment. They also had a hem of red on their garment. So children, as we found out, who actually died because of God. Now, I'll let you decide who this children is. But they're all going to be there because God saves everyone, right? Everyone who believes in Him, everyone who trusts in Him, He saves. So she keeps walking, and she's seeing all these amazing and beautiful things. But it gets to a point that Jesus gets in front of them. Now, she's with a lot of people. And He comes to them and says, come, my people. You have come out of a great tribulation and done my will, suffered for me. Come into supper, for I will gird myself and serve you. Now people start shouting. Yay! I think they were very hungry at this time, right? Because they hadn't eaten anything before. So they were hungry, so they get into a place, and then there's a table. A table that I cannot even draw or search on Google because it's impossible to find out, because it's a table miles and miles in distance, made out of silver. How pretty is it? She looks at it and she says, wow, this is a huge table. But look one thing. If she focuses her eye anywhere on the table, she's able to see. She has perfect vision. How amazing is this? And what's on the menu? Oh, I love this. There are mangoes, of course, my favorite. This got to be in heaven, right? There's manna. There's also almonds. There's figs. There's pomegranates. There's grapes. And all sorts of other things. And now Ellen White sees all of this, and her mouth begins to water. Because she's hungry, right? So she wants to eat. So she comes to Jesus and she said, let me eat something. Let me get just a little taste, right? But Jesus comes to her and he says, not now. Those who eat of the fruit of this land go back to earth no more. But in a little while, if faithful, you shall both eat of the fruit of the tree of life and drink of the water of the fountain. What a bummer. When he got to the good part, Jesus says, you can't do this right now. Not only that, he goes forward and he says, you must go back to the earth again and relate to others what I have revealed to you. That's a mission, right? Now she got a mission. And then, little by little, at this time, she feels an angel carrying her down to earth. And now she's looking at her reality. And she starts to, her brain just going like, I don't like this. This is what she says. She says, sometimes I think I can stay here no longer. All things of earth look so dreary. I feel very lonely here, for I have seen better land. Oh, that I had wings like a dove, then I would fly away and be at rest. When she gets to earth, she sees everything, and everything looks horrible. Even the prettiest things on earth are not even compared to the ugliest things in heaven. And she looks at them, and this is what she says. Oh, how dark this world looked to me. I wept when I found myself here and felt homesick. I had seen a better world, and he had spoiled this one for me. I can't imagine this. Now, she came out of the vision, and she was very weak now. And she wrote, this is what she said. After I came out of the vision, I was exceedingly troubled, for he pointed out of my duty to go out among the people and present the truth. My health was so poor that I was in constant bodily suffering, and to all appearances had but a short time to live. I was only 17 years of age, small and frail, unused to society, and naturally so timid and retrieving that it was painful for me to meet strangers. I can relate to her because I always felt like this too. I never liked to speak in public much. And I feel what she's saying. Like now she feels that she has a mission, right? What Jesus told her, go back down and you tell everyone what you saw. You tell, not the good parts, everything. You tell where were they, how they were walking, what was going to happen. You tell them that there's hope in the future. That's the message that she had. And then she says even more, right? She had a hard time accepting this call. She says, I coveted death as a release from the responsibilities that were crowding upon me. At length, the sweet peace I had so long enjoyed left me, and despair again proceeded upon my soul. Oh, she wanted to die, rather die. But then you know what she does? She goes and fulfills her message, her mission. She fulfills her mission because this is what God asked her to do, right? She goes and she writes about 100,000 pages, 24 books, 2 book manuscripts, 5,000 periodical articles, more than 2,000 tracts and pamphlets, 3,500 pages of typed manuscripts and letters, 2,000 handwritten letters, many sermons preached, and an estimate of 2,000 visions that she had throughout her life. What a life she had. What a life she had. For 70 years, she ministered a message of love and a message of focus in Jesus Christ. And this is what boggled me when I found this out. Her message was not a message of don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. It was not. Her message from the beginning was like this. Hey, listen, I've seen, it's good, heaven is awesome, you don't want to miss it. So listen, do everything you can to be there. Follow Jesus, get close to Him, love Him. Don't let this world steal you from Jesus. That's her message. Everything she said goes back to this. Because she wanted everyone to experience what she had experienced in a probably small sense, After 70 years, in February of 1915, Ellen White breaks her hip, and she's confined to bed. Now, back then, there were no hip replacements or anything like that. So being confined to bed pretty much meant you were going to die. And people knew that if God didn't intersect on her health, she would die. Her son, Willie White, he printed on the Review and Herald a weekly update on her mother's health. And you can actually go and see it. You can actually read those snippets that he created. And you can see that her health was not doing good. Every day she was losing more mobility. Every day she was losing more conscience, and she was staying down and all that. But, a group of Seventh-day Adventists from that region would go every Sabbath and still worship with her. She still, they still wanted her to experience worship. And in the beginning, she was able to sit down. Later on, she couldn't sit down. She would have to lay down. Close to the end, she was laying down, and she was even non-responsive. On July 10th, 1915, the group came to worship with her, to pray with her, and they began to sing the song, Sweet By and By. And as they sang this song, she did something she had never done before. Even though her eyes were closed, she looked unresponsive. Her mouth began to mumble the words they were singing. And what were the words that they were singing? Do you know the song? There's a land there is fairer than they, and by faith we can see it afar. Sing with me. For the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on the beautiful shore. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. Doesn't it sound like her vision? Look, for 70 years, this 17-year-old, that had seen something amazing, spent her whole life, everything she did, every waking hour she had was focusing one thing, in letting us know that there's something better for us, that this world is not it. There's something much more. There's something much better. There's something that we cannot miss. For 70 years, she talked about it. But I believe that it was the memory of her first vision at 17 that kept her faithful. It was the memory of her first vision that kept her going when things were bad. It was the memory that kept her strong in times of struggle. It was the hope that one day she would sit at the beautiful shore that helped her through her struggles. Because when you sing heaven, there is nothing in this world that will keep you here. Nothing in this world. Ellen died 6 days after that, on July 16, 1915. And let me tell you, this is a story more than only Ellen White's story. This is a story of a young girl, 17 years old, who received a message from God to go and tell the world a message of hope and a message that he's coming soon. Now, he could have chosen an older person, a more eloquent speaker. He could have chosen someone who had lots of experience. But no, he looked at the 17-year-old and he said, this is the person for the job. Now, young person, sitting over here, I want to let you know that Jesus looks at you, and even though you might think that you have nothing to give, he looks at you and he says, you're the person for the job. And he does not call the ones that he sees qualified. He qualifies the ones that he calls. Just remember that. For Ellen White, when she got to the end of her life, the words of 2 Timothy 4, 7, and 8 became a reality. He says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. Brothers and sisters, are you longing for God's appearing today? Are you longing for his appearing today? Let me talk to the young people again. Listen, as I learned the story of the pioneers and of Ellen White, I see how God has led a group to do an amazing thing. And trust me, he did before and he will do it again. Now you're sitting here, just put your lives in God's hand and let him use you. What are you holding back? Just go and do something for him. He's going to use you in a mighty way. God will use you the same way he used our pioneers, because the same way you are, they were just like you. They were young. They were inexperienced. They had no apparent talent sometimes, but they put their lives in God's hand, and God molded them into something amazing. Every time I read the stories of the pioneers, it gives me hope, because I know that the God who guided them through the past will guide us through the future, and he's going to do something amazing with you, young people of this church. All you have to do is to be willing. Are you willing to do this? Are you willing to do this? Because we have to remember, we're just like them. They're not special. They were not someone who were in a different pedestal or in a different, place that we were. They're just like us, living life without, not wanting to do some things. But God called them for something amazing. And he's calling you today because we're just like them. May God bless you. Amen.